Hi, welcome to Cultivating Effective Communicators. My name is Kathy Meester, and I've been involved in Christian education for over 25 years. 16 of those years, I've been privileged to be a classroom teacher. My very first classroom teaching experience was with 5th and 6th graders in a combination class using the tools that Abeka supplies for teachers. Since that time, I have taught 6th grade, I've taught a variety of other classes, and then I've also had the wonderful privilege to homeschool my own children using the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade Abeka program. And what a wonderful privilege all of these moments have been in my life. And it all started back in the 70s when my parents realized that their children would not receive a Christian education unless they did something. And what they did was in 1973, they started a small Christian school in our church's basement. What a time that was. And so now I am a first generation Abeka student, privileged to teach the Abeka curriculum to my own 4th graders now here at Pensacola Christian Academy. Today we're going to be exploring how to effectively communicate to our students how they can truly be effective communicators in their world and be successful in our language classes in our 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade language. Well, let's get started. Well, let's start with the advantages of a traditional language program. And when we use a traditional language curriculum, there are a lot of advantages that go along with that. First of all, we're helping our students to have good, effective communication skills. I don't know about you, but I have on occasion been to a high school graduation or maybe even a church function where a high school graduate has been asked to speak in front of a group. My heart always goes out to these young people who have spent years compiling their education and they are struggling to be that effective communicator, to correctly express their thoughts to a crowd. And so this is what a traditional language program does. It helps to equip our students to be young people who will stand out in any crowd. Next, I want to share with you a verse, and this is 1 Peter 3:15. Let me read it for you. The Bible says, "And be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear." So that's where we want our students to be. That's where I want my students to be this year when they leave my classroom. I want them to be young people who are ready to have an answer for the people who are around them, but able to do that effectively. The next thing is that the traditional language program, it helps us to be able to have our young people develop the opportunity to be able to think logically, to be able to critically think, to come up with answers that are not just on their own, just what they think might be a right answer, but answers that are logical, that they're critically thought, that they're even biblically based answers that they can give. And then next, a traditional language program like the Abeka program helps students to be able to learn and to be able to apply and also review concepts that are taught. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on as we go through this talk today. Next, let's talk about preparing for the language class. Now, I have to admit it, in my 16 years of classroom teaching, I can remember a few really bad days that I've had. And not necessarily because my students were having an off day or because something happened necessarily in the classroom. But all of those days when I've sat down at the end of the day and thought about what happened, well, I can tell you that I had not properly prepared for the day. So at the moment when you are preparing the day before your lesson, take time to look over the curriculum notes. Know what's coming at the end of that day? Where do you want your students to be at the end of your day? What are you looking at for a review? What are you looking at for application, helping those students to be able to be where they need to be? And it's going to help you have a lot better days. So I know I want more of those great days this year than I even have in years past. Next thing is prepare the day before. Make sure that before you leave the school that afternoon, that you have things prepared for the next day. And once again, we never know maybe what might happen the morning of. You might have car trouble, you might have a sick child. And so having those things ready before you actually leave the classroom really can be a great setup for you to have a wonderful day in your language class. Next, anticipate the needs of our students. Sometimes when I'm looking over those classroom curriculum notes, I notice that I'm going to be teaching a new concept the next day. One of the concepts that I review in 4th grade is teaching action verbs, teaching what is a verb, and then we go right into the action verb. And on that day, to prepare for the next day, oftentimes I'll prepare maybe 3x5 cards with different verbs, action verbs on those cards. And I have them all ready to go. So the next day I can just hand those action word cards out to my students, and they have a lot of fun taking those cards, looking at them. Maybe one of them will say hop, and they'll hop in place. And I have illustrated an action verb. Maybe one of them will say skip, and they always like that one because they can skip back and forth in front of the classroom. But I prepared those things before I even leave school for the day before when I'm preparing these lessons. Well, one of the joys of teaching the Abeka curriculum is that each year builds one on top of the other. And we find out that in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, that there's a building process that goes all the way through. So let's talk about a couple of those aspects. And I'm going to show you a slide, first of all, of the 3rd grade curriculum. Now notice in this example how 3rd graders are learning how to identify different parts of speech in a sentence and tell how they're relating to other words. So in the 3rd grade, students are learning 6 of the 8 parts of speech. And like I said, their relationship to one another in a sentence. Now in the 4th grade, we're taking another step. Notice how the building process is working here. In 4th grade, students are learning, let's say for instance, the preposition. Now they're learning that a preposition shows how other words are related to each other in a sentence. And then in 5th grade, students are taking that concept, building on what they've learned in 3rd grade and 4th grade. And then in the 5th grade, students are learning how to diagram those prepositional phrases and attach to them the term adjective or adverb phrase. And then by the time we're getting into the 6th grade, students are taking that knowledge and they are able to diagram even more complicated sentences. Well, let's take another example of this building process, and let's follow through with the teaching of the sentence. Now, in 3rd grade, students are taught the difference between a sentence, a complete thought, and a fragment, which is just, it's not a complete thought at all. In fact, a lot of times I will tell my students that a sentence makes sense, but a fragment almost sounds as if, well, the thought hasn't been completed. It's almost as if we're telling a story and we say right in the middle, the best part of the story, come back next week and you'll find out what happens. And so that's the fragment. The fragment doesn't give that complete thought. It doesn't give a complete idea. And so in this example that you're seeing on the screen, you're seeing that 3rd graders are having to analyze whether these groups of words are complete thoughts or just part of a thought. So if they're a sentence or a fragment. Now let's go on to 4th grade. So in 4th grade, we're taking that same idea and we're applying it even into a higher level of thinking. We're doing that building process, building 3rd grade and putting the 4th grade on top. Now in fourth grade, as you can see in this example that's in front of you, that students are having now to determine whether a group of words is a sentence, a fragment, so those are the two things they learned in third grade, and now they're having to determine if the group of words is a run-on. So if there are two complete thoughts put together incorrectly into one sentence. And so they're having to analyze that. Now, the next example I have is from the fifth grade language book. Now, in the fifth grade language book, students are having to not only determine if a group of words is a sentence, but now they're having to determine whether these groups of words, these sentences, are simple sentences or if they are compound sentences. Now, I want you to look specifically at the example that's on the screen. I want you to look at page 55, think C, it's sentence 2. And look what that sentence says. It's providing you a wonderful opportunity. Always speak the truth. God will prosper you. Now, here is an opportunity just laid at your feet to be able to integrate biblical principles into your students' lives right in the middle of an application section in your language book. So don't pass up those opportunities to encourage your students to live honest and godly lives. Well, in the sixth grade, we're going to take that teaching moment that we had in fifth grade with the simple and compound sentences, and now we're going to add to that where sixth graders are trying to analyze these sentences, find out if they're simple, they're compound, and then they're going to diagram sentences that are on a little bit higher level. By the time students reach the seventh grade, wow, they are well equipped to face any junior high English classroom. Now, let's go to probably one of the most important topics that we're going to discuss today, and that is how to effectively teach a language class. What does a language lesson look like? Well, let me give you some of the main components of a great, successful language lesson. First of all, you want to make sure that you have an effective review. Now, review always comes at the beginning of any language lesson. Effective reviews need to be well planned and they should be fast paced. You should have that sense of urgency, not wasting any time, because review is valuable. You know, within the last few months, I have been very well reminded of the value of review. A few months ago, I had my junior high daughter. She came to me one night and she had some homework that she needed help with. Now, of course, I happened to be the parent that it was available to help with that homework that night. And so she brought me this homework. It was from algebra, and it was factoring polynomials. Now, do you know how long it's been since I've even heard the word polynomial or even thought about that? I teach fourth grade. I haven't heard that word in probably 15 years. And so, wow, I sat down with my daughter, we read through the example problem, we talked it through, we worked it out, and we collaborated, and we came up with the correct answer. Now think about this. What if for the last 15 years I had spent, a few days a week working some problems, factoring polynomials? That night when she approached me with that homework, I would have been able to very quickly give her an answer and be able to help her. But review is very valuable, and I was reminded of that in a big way that night. Our students need that review. Now, you could take this time to sing the verb list. We have lots of different songs that we sing during our class time. It gives the students an opportunity to stand up, to sing, to move around a little bit, and you want them to get some activity before you're actually teaching something new to them. We have songs for the pronoun list. I already mentioned the verb list, the linking verbs, the helping verbs, the being verbs, all of these wonderful songs that you can sing with them. It gets them moving around. Now, a couple of years ago, the very first year I taught fourth grade, I had taught the students how to diagram subjects and verbs. And I really felt confident as we moved into our very first test with the very first diagramming. I felt like my students had mastered that concept. And I was so discouraged as that night I started grading those tests, and I noticed there were a lot of my students who they diagrammed subjects and verbs, but they switched the position of the subject and verb. They were writing the verb first and then the subject. Well, it didn't take me very long that night to come up with a song that in our class, even this year, we call the diagramming song, and it solved the problem. And here's how it goes. It goes like this. First you draw a line, the subject's on the left, draw a line straight through, and then the verb is on the right. And wow, we learned that song the next day in our class. We sang it a few times, and then the next time we had a test, the diagrams were perfect. Everybody had the subject on the left and the verb on the right. So it was great. But then we had another problem, because then I was introducing diagramming adjectives and adverbs. And we had the same thing. Students seemed that they were doing fine in class, but then we would get to the test and they had no idea where to put these adjectives and adverbs. I think it was not as clear and concise as it could have been. And so thus was born the second verse of the diagramming song. And here's how it goes. Draw a slanted line that looks just like a slide. On the slanted line, write the word that describes. And once again, solved our problems. And I've used that song ever since with my fourth graders, and we've never had a problem again with where to diagram subjects and verbs or adjectives and adverbs. So just really simple things like that can help your students be incredibly successful in your class. Now, we talked about the review for our class and how important that is. Keep it lively, keep it interactive. Now, let's talk about introducing the new concept. Now, this is the point in our lessons where we're taking our students from the known, what they already know, to the unknown. So this is that new unfamiliar territory, and we're going to guide them there during this time when we're introducing the new concept. Be enthusiastic about the new material that's being presented during the day. I know that often our students, they really are reflecting our attitude toward the events of the day. And if we're not enthusiastic about presenting these new concepts in language, that very quickly is translated to our students. A great illustration that I have about enthusiasm is my youngest daughter. She enjoys riding roller coasters. In fact, a few years ago, we went to an amusement park, and there was a ride that she really wanted to ride. And once again, I was the parent, the only available parent that could go with her on this ride. And wow, she said, "Mom, you're going to enjoy this ride. It's just going to be great. You're going to love it." And I told her, wow, I don't like any rides that are high, that have heights, and I don't like them that are very fast. And this ride had both heights and fastness along with it. And she said, "Come on, Mom, you only have to ride it one time." And so reluctantly, I went on that ride because of her enthusiasm. And you know what? I survived. I'm here today. And you know what? I enjoyed that, and I made a really special memory with my daughter. And why did I do that? I don't like heights. I don't like anything too fast. Why did I do that? Well, it was the enthusiasm of my daughter. So we want to bring that kind of enthusiasm to our students. Get them excited about these new concepts that you're going to be presenting to them. They're very important tools that your students need for success in their life. Well, a couple of years ago, I got a card from one of my students after the end of the school year. And it is still one of the favorite notes I've ever gotten from a student. And here's what a fourth grade young man said to me. He said, "Dear Mrs. Meester, thank you so much for teaching me fourth grade language this year. I never knew language was my favorite subject until you were my teacher." Wow. I want to get more of those kinds of notes this year and in years to come. So that's a challenge for you. Now, the curriculum gives lots of wonderful ideas for you to be able to take your students from the known to the unknown. Use your curriculum ideas as a springboard to take you and your teaching to an exciting, enthusiastic level. Use sentences on the board to illustrate new concepts. Use the sentence strips. Use PowerPoint sentences. But make sure that your students have a clear explanation of the new concepts that are presented during the day. One of the concepts that I teach during the year is helping verbs. Now, when I teach helping verbs, I've already taught the students about action verbs. They show action. And being verbs, they just show our state of being. But when we add helping verbs, I always like to give the students this illustration. When my daughters were very young, I had an infant and a 2-year-old, and oftentimes I would have to go run an errand to our local post office, and it was one of those old post offices that have the big heavy doors on the front. And I would pull up to the parking lot. I would get out of the car. I had an infant in a car carrier on one hand. I was tightly holding the hand of my 2-year-old, and we would start up toward the post office. Now, I knew my hands were full, and I could not reach up and pull that heavy door open. But more often than not, by the time I got up to the door, I would hear a voice behind me, normally just a stranger, and they would be saying, ma'am, you look like you need some help. And they would pull that heavy door open, and we would walk through, and wow, it would be wonderful. Well, I had some great help when I went to that post office. And the same is true with helping verbs. Helping verbs always come before the verb that they help. And that wonderful illustration just gives the students kind of a point of reference. It grabs their attention, and they remember that a helping verb comes before the word that it helps. And then I would tell and teach the students that in those helping verbs and action or being verbs, we always have a main verb. That's the last verb in that group. And then the entire helping verb, action verb, helping verb, linking verb, that whole thing is called a verb phrase. Let's take a moment to step into my 4th grade classroom. And today, I want you to look and see the concept that's being taught. It's the concept of the predicate adjective. Now, I've already taught my students about the linking verb. We know about the subject. But today I want you to look at just the simple illustration that is used to help students to be able to connect their known to their unknown by using a simple illustration to illustrate what a linking verb does in a sentence. Let's take a look. We are ready to get started with language class today, and I have a couple of students that I want to come on up. So Alan and Deanna are going to come up and mark this sentence. While they're doing that, the rest of the class, go ahead and stand. We're going to face our friends that have joined us today. We're going to sing our State of Being verb song. Ready?
And is our was word being, then these are the state of being verbs.
Great singing, and you may be seated. Great job for Alan. Alan's marked the sentence, and he has put the dividing line between the complete subject, which is very small today, and the complete predicate, which is a little bit longer today. And well done for Deanna. Now, I've got to ask Deanna before you're seated, how did you know that you have been used is actually an action verb?
Because you can actually do it.
That's right. It's something that you can do. What do we call a verb that is more than one word making up an entire verb? And we consider it as one. Alan?
A verb phrase?
That is a verb phrase. Excellently done. We have been talking about different kinds of verbs and what they can do in the sentence. And we're going to look at something today that I enjoy. This entire lesson is going to be a lot about the next thing we're going to see here on the screen, and that is pizza. Now, I have only met one person in my life who does not like pizza. I think for most of us, we would agree with this sentence that pizza is delicious. Now, do you see something right away? Do you see an adjective that's following the verb that describes pizza? Do you see that? Samaria? What word is it?
Delicious.
That is the word delicious. Notice how delicious it is in the predicate of the sentence, but it's really describing the subject. So this is very interesting. We call this a predicate adjective. It's an adjective describing the subject, but it is in the predicate part of the sentence. Now, you might say, well, Mrs. Meester, how am I ever going to figure this out? It is so simple. We need to look at what kind of verb is being used in this sentence. If you'll notice, right here is the verb is. Now, we just sang through our state of being verb list, but do you know there's another group of words that sounds a lot like the being verb list, but it's actually a group of words that help link words in the predicate back to the subject. They are called linking verbs. Now, linking verbs make me think of something that I have right here, and that's a paper chain. And I know paper chains are a lot of fun to make around Christmas time. We made a paper chain here in our class. It's a lot of fun. But you know, paper chains are made up of links. What do links do? Well, they are helping us to be able to join one thing to the other. You see this pizza chain right here? Well, what is helping to connect pizza to delicious? Well, it is the linking verb. Well, we can find it here. It is the linking verb is. So that is exactly what linking verbs do. Linking verbs are much like links in a paper chain. They help to link a word in the subject to a word in the predicate. And here in our sentence, we have pizza is the subject, is the linking verb, linking delicious back to the subject. Now, here's a quick test you can do to test and make sure that delicious is actually a predicate adjective. You can take delicious and try it in front of the word pizza, and it should make sense. We all know this makes sense. Delicious pizza. Absolutely. And this is pepperoni pizza. Raise your hand if pepperoni is your favorite kind of pizza. It's one of my favorites. Thank you. You may put your hands down. All right, let's take a look at some examples I have up here on the board. Mom's flowers are beautiful. Notice in this sentence, our complete subject, mom's flowers are beautiful, our complete predicate. And then are is one of those verbs that's on the linking verb list. Am, is, are, was, were. And then what are beautiful? Flowers answers that question. Flowers are. And then notice beautiful, once again, beautiful is going to be describing flowers. Mom's, we know already, is an adjective answering the question, whose flowers? And then beautiful is also describing flowers. Remember, once again, you could grab beautiful, put it in front of flowers, and it should make sense. Beautiful flowers. Oh, look at this next sentence. I love this sentence. God is good. You know, God is good. He is so good to us. He is good to us all the time. No matter if we feel like a circumstance is not so good for us, God is still good. And I'm telling you, this is a great sentence to think about linking an adjective back to the subject. So notice here's our dividing line between the complete subject, complete predicate. Then is that linking verb, very important to this sentence pattern. And then God is the subject. And notice what is describing God. Oh, we know it right here. Good. Good God. God is good all the time. We always need to remember that. Look at the last one here. Were, right in front of were, is where that dividing line goes, dividing the complete subject, complete predicate. We have were is the linking verb. We know that because we're going to do some linking in a minute. Puppies is the subject. We always know a and the are always adjectives, and then that describes puppies. But then look in the predicate, excited is that word that is also describing a word back in the subject. So that would be an adjective in the predicate describing the subject. Go ahead and pull out your workbook page. Let's look at page 115. Now, if you notice there at the top of the page, we're reminded that effective communicators are going to be looking out for correct information. We're looking for these predicate adjectives today. Look at Think A. You're going to mark the sentence, and then you're going to put PA in the blank if the bolded word is a predicate adjective. You're going to put an X in the blank if the bolded word is not a predicate adjective. Now, make sure your pencils are down. We're going to look at the first one up here. Notice I've already marked the first sentence for you. So we have this dividing line between the complete subject, complete predicate. Cover is the verb, and forest is the subject. Now, we need to think about this on your worksheet there. The word small is bolded. Now, I'm thinking, would small be the predicate adjective describing forest? Well, let me think if that makes sense. Small forests, usually forests, are quite large. So I know for number one, I'm just going to put an X in that blank. Look at the second sentence that you see on your paper there. Of all the trees in Spain, a eucalyptus tree is tallest. Notice I'm going to go ahead and mark my sentence. I know that vertical line goes right in front of the verb. Tree is the subject, is the verb. Now you have the word tallest is bolded. All right, I'm going to ask myself the question, is tallest describing the subject? Well, it is, because I can read tallest in front of tree and it makes sense. Tallest tree. I know in this sentence, I do have a predicate adjective. Now go ahead and pick up your pencil. Let's look at number 3. In number 3, we have eucalyptus trees are troublesome to Spanish people. Go ahead and mark your sentence. You're putting that vertical line in front of are. Are is your verb. What is the subject in this sentence? Deanna?
Trees.
You are correct. Now look at the word troublesome. And you're trying to think through this here. Is troublesome, we know that that word sounds like an adjective, but could it possibly be a predicate adjective? So take troublesome, you're going to try it in front of trees. Does troublesome describe trees? Brooklyn?
Yes.
Yes, it does. So what are you going to mark in the blank?
PA.
PA for predicate adjective. Well done. All right, let's look at that last one. In the past, fires devastated Spain's eucalyptus forests. So once again, mark your sentence. Where are you putting the vertical line, Alan?
In between fires and devastated.
Okay, excellent job. What is your subject and verb? DJ?
Devastated.
Is the subject or verb?
Fire.
What is the subject?
Fire.
Good. And what is the verb?
Devastated.
Well done. Great job. Now look at the bold printed word eucalyptus. Is eucalyptus the predicate adjective in this sentence? All right, let's take that eucalyptus, try it in front of the subject fires. Does that make sense, Emma?
No.
It does not. So in the blank, what would you put? Samaria?
X.
Excellent job. Well done. I hope you enjoyed taking a moment and looking inside of the classroom to see how that language lesson can unfold. Hopefully you also noticed that the students in the classrooms this year, we were socially distanced. So these classrooms can really work and work effectively, even in some really interesting days that we've had this past year. Also, did you notice that that paper chain was that simple illustration that was used to help the students see that the linking verbs actually do link the subject and the adjective that's in the predicate? Now, you weren't able to see this, but at the end of the class time, students were provided with their own paper and tape, and they were able to construct their own paper chain, their own sentence with a subject, a linking verb, and a predicate adjective. So I wanted to share that with you. That was a really interesting lesson for us. And the children were really enthusiastic about learning predicate adjectives that day. Now, in teaching the new concept, you as the teacher, you want to walk the students through the process one time. You could use the chalkboard, the sentence strips, you could use a PowerPoint sentence, and then do a second sentence with your students. Analyze the sentence, whatever the concept is, you want to do a second sentence and illustrate that for the students. Then the third sentence, do on the board or PowerPoint, but get some classroom participation. Get some students answering why questions. Why should we mark this? Or why did I put a vertical line in that place? Why did I underline that word twice? And have them answer those questions. Be interactive. If you have time, maybe do an additional sentence together, collaborating as a class. And then it's time for application. So that's the third main part of the language lesson, and that is application. Now, during the application portion, the students will pull out their workbooks, turn to the workbook page for the day. Just as a reminder, the workbook page should never be a substitute for the classroom teacher. So after you have done all the explanation, taking your students from the known to the unknown, now it's their opportunity to see how much that they have grasped from your lesson. During this time, don't just sit at your desk. Don't look through what's coming up in the next class, but walk around your classroom. Observe what your class is doing. Are the students working diligently? Are they understanding the concept that you've just presented? This is a time that I always grab my pack of smelly markers and I walk around and I maybe will put a smiley face on an exercise of a student that's working diligently. And then also, this is an opportunity for me to notice students who probably are going to need additional help with a concept that's presented that day. And then we'll talk about that in just a few moments. Well, as we have seen, the language lesson should be strong, and it should be a time when students are learning and being able to apply what they've learned. And the Abeka curriculum provides so much opportunity for that application. Now let's talk about another rewarding factor of the Abeka program, and that is integrating higher level thinking into our classes. The Abeka curriculum provides a wealth of opportunities for our students to practice critical thinking skills to apply what they have learned in our language classes. We are able to see our students display critical thinking in original work through composition. Let's talk about each grade level and how, once again, we have this wonderful building process that's built into the Abeka curriculum. Now, in the third grade, students are led through a variety of book reports. In the third grade also, students are very strongly practicing writing an introduction and an ending or a concluding paragraph for their book reports and for other paragraphs that they're writing. So they should leave third grade with a really strong grasp on writing a paragraph, what that looks like, especially with that introduction and concluding paragraph. Then in the fourth grade, fourth graders review writing paragraphs, and they also review proofreaders' marks And then they end the year with a 5-paragraph historical essay. And those essays, writing, fourth graders really learn that essay writing is incredibly rewarding, and it will help them as they move on to fifth grade. Because in fifth grade, students use their writing abilities not only to write book reports, to write paragraphs, but also they are writing a research report on a historical person. And so what wonderful skills they're learning. Then sixth graders take all of those concepts that they've learned about writing and critical thinking, and then they apply that to a historical event research report. Now, before they get to that research report, they are working on writing different types of paragraphs. And the example that you'll see here, they have been given 2 different sets of information. One would compare the sea lion and the walrus. And the next bit of information contrasts the sea lion and the walrus. And then sixth grade students are challenged to write a really well-written paragraph comparing and contrasting the likenesses and differences of the sea lion and walrus. Now, we come to the big project in composition in sixth grade, and that is writing the research report on a historical event. Now, sixth graders are challenged to research with note cards, with an outline. They're encouraged also to write bibliography cards, and then they have a 500 to 600 word rough draft that they're writing about their topic. Now, in my years when I taught sixth grade, using the Abeka curriculum, I noticed that my sixth graders often would be very nervous as they started to write their rough draft. And then when rough drafts were turned in, often many of them would have even more words than they needed for their rough draft. And then it was always a lot of fun to take those rough drafts and to be able to polish them and come up with concise wording. And then the students were always so feeling this great sense of accomplishment as they would turn in those research reports. Just as a fun side note, in the years since I taught that first group of sixth graders, I've had a few sixth graders who are now adults contact me and let me know that they have saved their sixth grade research report. So these are something that our students can really revel in their great accomplishment of writing these reports. And then like I said before, students leave our elementary classrooms, head on to junior high, and they really are very well equipped to face junior high and high school, and then beyond, even beyond that. Now, through all of these experiences, third through sixth grade, students really have the opportunity to begin to enjoy writing, and they can see how writing is so important to developing great, strong communication skills. And that's really part of our job as a language teacher, is to be able to provide them with those skills. Let's take a moment now to step into Miss Converse's third grade classroom. Now today, Miss Converse is going to walk our students through some critical thinking as they are going to spend some time collaborating as a class, first of all, and they're going to be comparing and contrasting some planets. So I want you to take a look, see how Miss Converse at the beginning of her lesson uses a simple illustration with students in her classroom to get her students excited and taking them from the known to the unknown as they critically think in this clip. Let's watch this.
Maybe you've wondered before, how can I compare this to something? Maybe somebody said, well, how is this like this to you? How is this different? Is this house like this house, or is it different? Well, today we're going to learn how to compare things. Sometimes they're the same, or we can contrast them. Sometimes they're different. Let me give you an example. I would like Caleb and Carly to come on up to the front. Carly, you can stand on this side. Caleb, you can stand on this side. And we're going to compare something that is the same. Now I can say they are both students at our school. That is something that's the same about them. But then we can contrast things as well, like Caleb, he's wearing blue. But Carly, she's got a little bit of blue, she's mainly wearing pink. We could say Caleb is a boy, Carly is a girl. But we could say, if we were saying the same, he has curly hair and Carly has curly hair. So there are some things that are the same and things that are different. You two may have a seat. Thank you for helping me out demonstrate that. So we can compare things, and we have this comparing contrasting diagram to help us. Let's compare two seasons. We can compare summer and winter. Well, one thing about summer is that there's hot weather during the summer. But winter is very different, isn't it? So under winter, we could say that there's cooler weather. Now, sometimes in Florida it might still be a little bit warm, but it's definitely cooler than in the summer if you've been here during a summer. There's lots of plants growing in the summer, but in the wintertime, we've learned in science that plants are dormant. They're sleeping during the winter. Many of our plants are anyway. And then during the summer, of course, there's a lot more sunlight. Your days are longer. You can go out and play until almost bedtime during the summer, but then during winter, there's going to be fewer hours of sunlight. Well, there are some ways that they are the same, though. They're both seasons, right? We've learned that there are 4 seasons. We can say both summer and winter are seasons. Another thing we can say is that they're both caused by the tilt of the Earth on its axis. That's what we know. We learned from science that seasons are caused by. Now let's see if you can do one of your own. Go ahead and open your books to page 182. And we are going to compare and contrast dogs and cats. So I want you to go ahead and on your compare contrast, I want you to write dogs on one side and cats on the other side. Now I want you to think of one fact about dogs. I'm thinking of the sound that a dog makes. Abeka.
A dog barks.
Yes, so under dog we can write that a dog barks. Now let's contrast that because we know that the cat is different. What kind of sound does the cat make? Lee.
It purrs.
Well, if it were to make a sound we could hear out loud, yes, sometimes we can hear that purr, but the actual noise compared to a dog?
It meows.
Yes. Now let's think of one way they're the same before I have you work on your own for a minute. Mackenzie, what is one way they're the same?
They both are animals.
Yes, definitely, and I'm thinking of one specific type of animal we learned about in science. What group do they belong to, Noah? Good, so let's write here in the same space of both of our animals, mammals. Now I'm going to give you a minute. I want you to think of at least one more that you can only put for dogs or cats, and then one more way that they're the same. All right, let's see what you wrote down for your compare contrast. What ideas you have? What did you write about dogs, Justin?
They can't climb.
Oh, you're right. I've never seen a dog in a tree before. So we can write down can't climb. So contrast that to cats. What do cats do, Jeffrey?
They climb.
They do climb. Now I need something that's the same about these. Lee. They're both what?
They both have fur.
That's right, because they're mammals. Good thinking. One more way that a dog and cat are different. Layla.
A dog is more friendly than a cat.
Oh yes, dogs are often quite friendly. Cats often they like to be alone. What is one more thing that is the same about both of these? They are both, can you fill in the blank? Carly.
They are both pets.
Yes, that you thought of exactly what I was thinking of. Well, we have a great start here to our compare contrast. I'm sure you can think of even more ideas, and you may continue to work on that. Great job so far.
Well, I know that I enjoyed watching Miss Converse as she guided her students through that lesson on critical thinking. This was from lesson 160, and she worked so well with her class. Did you notice how the class worked together to come up with their answers? That kept the students very engaged in what Miss Converse was doing. And then also, did you notice how Miss Converse referenced a science lesson from earlier in the school year? And so once again, it's that way that the Abeka curriculum, it all weaves together in this beautiful plan for our students. And so thanks, Miss Converse, for letting us come into your classroom a little bit today. Well, we've seen how the Abeka curriculum can do so much for our students. Sometimes, though, we're going to have students who maybe are new to our school, new to our classroom, maybe students that are just struggling throughout our school year. Well, let's take some time to talk about help class and remediation. What can we do to help those students? You might have a time before class begins in the morning, before your school day even begins, to set aside some time for a help class with your students. Maybe for you, it would be easier for your school schedule to have that time, maybe during study hall, or maybe during an activity time, a time when the class would be fairly quiet and you could work one-on-one with students or maybe with a small group of students. But what would that help class look like? Well, first of all, in a help class, at that beginning of help class, you do want to review concepts that you know that the students are going to need a little bit of extra review on. So start with, make it a fast-paced review. You could play a quick game with them, have those sentences on the board, use those sentence strips. I love to use the sentence strips because I'm not having to write a lot of extra things on my board before my whole school day begins. So I can keep my boards looking nice for the day, and I'm just using those sentence strips. So that's a wonderful tool. Don't forget to use those. And so I would do a quick pace review, asking my students a lot of why questions. I would show them a sentence strip. Let's say maybe I was having them analyze a sentence, and I would have them tell me where the vertical line would go, separating the complete subject and complete verb. Where would the verb, which word would be the verb? Which word would be the subject? And maybe I would ask them different words in the sentence, what part of speech those would be. So that would be a quick pace review, get the students involved, keep them involved, make sure that you know if a student is just guessing at an answer. We want to make sure that students have factual reasons why they're doing what they're doing, why they're analyzing a sentence in a certain way. And a lot of times that's where we're able to really hone in on that, is during help class, because we're seeing them maybe guess at answers over and over again. So spend a couple of minutes doing a quick review. Secondly, you want to spend that second part of the help class, spend some time refreshing their memories on the new concept that you have recently taught in class. So you could give them just a quick recap on the teaching that you did on that concept. And then the last part of help class is having the students apply what you have just retaught them. And so give them an opportunity to work some problems on the board. Give them opportunities to analyze some sentence using the sentence strips. Have them pull out a scrap piece of paper and diagram some of the sentences that you have on the sentence strip. And then walk around, make sure that you're noticing whether those students are finally grasping those concepts. So help class, so important. Help class definitely helps your students have that extra confidence they need, even in language class. Oftentimes, I'll have a help class in the morning before school with some of my struggling students, and then I notice in language class later on during the day that those same students, a lot of times they're more eager to be involved in class, they're answering questions, they are having that confidence that they are grasping these concepts. And then always remember that parents truly appreciate that extra help that their students are getting because of your help. This past summer, my family had the exciting opportunity to be able to visit the Kennedy Space Center. Now, my husband, who's a scientist by trade, has always been really fascinated with space travel, and all of its inner workings. And so our family arrived at Kennedy Space Center looking for a day of learning and inspiration. Well, when we arrived, I knew what I wanted to see there that day at Kennedy Space Center, and it was in the large building that houses the memorabilia from the Space Shuttle Challenger that exploded in 1986. And as I entered that building that day, I was quickly looking for the Forever Remember exhibit. And as I entered the building that day, I began to think about 1986. In 1986, I was a sophomore in high school. I was already dreaming of the day when I would be teaching a classroom of my own. And an astronaut had caught my attention, because she wasn't an astronaut by trade. She was actually a school teacher. And that was Krista McAuliffe. And I began to follow her journey from classroom to astronaut. And I was just really fascinated by her life story. And so as I entered that building that day, I started down the long rows of glass cases housing the memorabilia of the astronauts who had lost their lives that day in the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion. And then there it was. It was the tribute to Krista McAuliffe. And there, for all the world to see, was a saying that often she had spoken to the students who were in her class. And here's what I saw that day. And her saying was, "I touch the future, I teach." I'm going to leave you with that thought today, that as we head into a new school year, we have been given the wonderful opportunity to influence these young people that God has given us for the Lord. And so let's take that opportunity this year and let's make this a wonderful year. Have a great school year.